This video is going to cover section 12.4, which is going to look at the peripheral nervous system in a little bit more detail. So here's again a diagram of what's contained within the peripheral nervous system, and we've looked at most of these things before. So the peripheral nervous system, we have sensory pathways and we have motor pathways, and of the motor pathways we have somatic nervous system, which is under conscious control or voluntary movement. And then we have the involuntary as well, which is the autonomic nervous system. And we haven't mentioned that too much yet, but the autonomic nervous system is comprised of the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous systems. And we'll explain those further a little bit later. So the structure of the peripheral nervous system, it's composed of nerves and ganglia. So the nerves are the bundles of axons, and the axons in nerves are called nerve fibers. And then we have the ganglia. Now, whenever you see the word ganglia, just think cell bodies. So the ganglia of nerves are swellings which are associated with nerves that contain collections of cell bodies. These are swellings in the nerve that are supposed to be there because they need more room for the cell bodies themselves, which we've talked about before in terms of for each nerve cell. You have dendrites, you have the cell body itself, and then you have the axons. And so whenever you see the term ganglia, that refers to a bundle of nerve cell bodies. So we do have cranial nerves, and we have 12 pairs of them, and they're attached to the brain, and they're all listed there, and you can see approximately where they run. And um, they're all kind of in the same area there, and these nerves, they can contain sensory input fibers, motor output fibers, or a combination of both. And they're largely concerned with the head, neck, and the facial regions. We also have the vagus nerve, um, and it has branches to internal organs as well. So the spinal nerves, we have 31 pairs of spinal nerves. These are a mix of motor and sensory fibers. Then we have a dorsal root, which contains sensory fibers that conduct impulses toward the spinal cord. So that's the direction that those impulses travel through the dorsal root. So those go toward the spinal cord. Then we also have a dorsal root ganglion. And so this is where you find, again, ganglion, the cell bodies. So this is where you have a mass of cell bodies of sensory neurons. We also have ventral roots, and these contain the motor fibers, and they conduct impulses away from the spinal cord to the effectors. Largely those would be voluntary muscles. And each spinal nerve, it serves a region of the body in which it is located. And there you can see a diagram of a cross-section of those. So the somatic system then, the peripheral nervous system is divided into the somatic system and the autonomic. So the somatic system, it takes sensory information from external sensory receptors to the central nervous system, and it takes motor commands away from the central nervous system to skeletal muscle. So it serves the skin, skeletal muscle, and tendons. Now, some actions are due to reflex actions as well, which we'll look at a little bit more shortly. So the reflex arc, it's a nerve pathway that carries out a reflex. And reflexes are built-in circuits that allow for protection and survival, really. They allow the body to react quickly to stimuli that could disrupt homeostasis. And reflexes, they're present at birth, and they do not require conscious thought. So generally speaking, we can respond to things more quickly through the reflex arcs than having to actually think about it. We, generally speaking, we can take necessary action to protect ourselves without even thinking about it, which is a good thing. For example, when you touch a sharp object or something hot. So this is sort of the way that it's kind of hardwired. And so you have a somatic reflex arc here where you have the stimulus that is perceived, and it causes sensory receptors in the skin to generate nerve impulses that travel in the sensory axons to the spinal cord. And then in the spinal cord itself, we have interneurons that integrate the data from these sensory neurons and then relay signals to the motor axons. So motor axons, then they convey the nerve impulses from the spinal cord to the skeletal muscle, which then will contract the appropriate muscles. So movement of the hand away from the pin is the response to a stimulus such as this. So you can see that we can make these sort of defensive movements without the use of the um, without the use of our thought. We don't have to think about it. It just it's a reflex that occurs purely within the spinal cord. Okay, so then that takes us to the autonomic system, and the autonomic system of the peripheral nervous system. This regulates the activity of cardiac, smooth muscle, and the glands. And within that, we have the sympathetic and the parasympathetic as well, which we will get to shortly. So the autonomic system, again, as I just said, it's comprised of the sympathetic and parasympathetic divisions. Both of these divisions, they also function automatically and usually involuntarily. Now, we can regulate things to a certain degree ourselves, but most of this happens automatically. And they innervate all the internal organs. And for each signal, they use two motor neurons that synapse at a ganglion. So they're involved in reflex actions such as blood pressure and breathing rate. So the sympathetic division, um, the sympathetic and parasympathetic actually function opposite one another. So whatever the sympathetic division increases, whatever the sympathetic increases and decreases, the parasympathetic would have the opposite, the exact opposite effect, pretty much. So the sympathetic is that response that where there's some kind of a stimulus where you need to respond in some way, whether that be in some kind of a um, athletic event or something like that. It's the sympathetic division that allows you to do that. So, for example, what the sympathetic division will do is it will inhibit tears, it will dilate pupils, inhibits salivation, it increases your heartbeat, dilates your airways, it stimulates the liver to release glucose, inhibits the digestive tract and urination, and uses the neurotransmitters epinephrine and norepinephrine, which acts on different cells to add to the fight or flight response. So that's the sympathetic division. And these are the things that it does. So you notice that it inhibits some things, but it stimulates others. So um, here is a diagram illustrating that. The one thing that I would like to point out with this diagram is that what you have, which runs pretty much all the way down beside the spinal cord, we have these sympathetic ganglia. And so again, ganglia, think cell bodies. This is where the autonomic nerve cells actually are. And from here, we make connections with just about all of the different systems and organs of the body. And so these ganglia then, as I mentioned, they lie right alongside the spine itself, not within like the spinal cord, but they lie outside the spine. However, they kind of follow along the path of the spine as well. So with the parasympathetic, pretty much works opposite the sympathetic, and this is involved in the rest and digest response. So it stimulates tears, constricts pupils, stimulates salivation, decreases your heart rate and blood pressure, constricts airways, stimulates the gallbladder to release bile, to digest that chipotle wrap that you had for lunch, let's say, and stimulates the digestive tract and urination. Also uses the neurotransmitter acetylcholine, which acts on different cells to add to the rest and digest response. So again, here's the diagram of the autonomic system once again. And so we have the sympathetic and the parasympathetic systems, which each of these make connections with all of the different organs and systems of the body. However, one has a stimulating effect on certain organs and systems, and the other would have an inhibiting effect. And here are some of the different effects that they have as far as the sympathetic and the parasympathetic systems go. So that concludes what we're going to look at as far as the peripheral nervous system goes.